Clark Aposhian, chairman of the Utah Shooting Sports Council, thank you so much for being part of Three Questions.
No problem whatsoever.
Every time we have another mass shooting in this country, the debate over gun rights seems to just widen the two sides. Why is that?
Well, it's a very divisive issue. It's an opportunity to talk about guns, and people want to know the reason why. Why did the person do that? Who was he? How did he come to do this? How was he able to do this? All these questions, but they tend to then focus on the gun and what laws would have prevented it and these kind of things. When we really should be, quite honestly, looking at the individual. And as we have seen by experience, we see that if you were to apply a template of laws, restrictive laws, universal background checks, or waiting periods, or magazine restrictions, it wouldn't have made a difference. And that's where Utah Shooting Sports Council comes in, is trying to educate those folks on what these laws are and try to, as best we can, not just stop there, but try to come up with some solutions.
According to the Gun Violence Archives, so far this year, there have been 255 mass shootings being defined as victims numbering at least four. 255 so far this year in 2019. Last year, there were 340 mass shootings. Why is it we are seeing so many mass shootings in this country?
That's a great question. If I knew the answer to that, Bob, I think we'd get right to work on that, but we don't know. We're seeing mass shootings across Europe. We're seeing mass shootings across the world. And I know that there's been some erroneous figures put out there, but if you look at the United States, and I'm not trying to say we can take heart in this, but we are not alone. We are, of European countries, we're 12th in frequency. We are 11th in the number of people killed. So we're not at the top, as some people have said. We're nowhere near the top. And in fact, if you look at the world on those mass shootings, given the same criteria, 4 or more people killed in a single incident, we're 66th in the world. So we're not alone. This is not a United States problem. It's a world problem.
What are some of the factors that are affecting the number of what seem to be an increasing number of mass shootings? What are those factors? If we don't have an answer as to why they're happening, what are at least some of the factors?
Well, I know that when we're talking about the ability to stop, if there was a shooting that might have been a mass shooting, but only one person was killed, or 2 people were killed, it won't make that list, and it likely won't make the news. How do we stop that? So we look at 2 different things. How can we stop the individual from ever even thinking about or being able to carry out a mass shooting, or how do we reduce the number of people killed or injured? So we're more on that end because we don't have a solution for the other. And so when we look at mass shootings, we look at 90% or more are done in areas where it's illegal for an individual, a law-abiding person, to carry a firearm for lawful self-defense. And then we look at, essentially a gun-free zone, or in the case of, say, Gilroy, California, you just can't get a permit to carry a firearm in most areas of California, and even if you could, it was a gun-free zone. So we look at that. Those are some of the factors that increase. If you start to look at places where people can engage, the average number of people killed is 3. Places where it takes law enforcement to engage, the average number of people is 14 killed. So those factors are staring us in the face. They're huge, but no one wants to talk about them.
It was shocking at the time, the Las Vegas shooting on that country music concert from a window in the hotel room. The gunman actually got his weapons and ammunition legally. How do you explain that kind of thing happening, where scores of people are killed or injured because of it?
Huge, yeah. And the person did buy. In fact, most of the shooters in these multiple victim shooters, in these high profile attacks, 3/4 of them purchased the firearm legally. went through the background check and everything like that. How do we explain evil in the world? The person had, there might have been some telltale signs for that individual in Las Vegas, but were they enough to say, hey, we gotta stop this person? Sometimes there just isn't enough for law enforcement to hang something on and say, we need to bring this guy in, we need to, arrest them, that type of thing. There just isn't, and there is evil in the world. And how do you stop that? I know that there is an attempt to do that with the red flag laws, but it falls short. It falls short on both constitutional violations, and it falls short on actually stopping people.
Red flag laws are in place in several states around the country. Utah had some legislation in 2018, but that red flag measure died in the legislature. Since what happened in Dayton and El Paso, have you seen or do you get a sense that red flag legislation just may get passed into law here in Utah?
It may. It absolutely may. But the reason we oppose that ERPO is for some very specific reasons, because we actually like the concept of intercepting someone before they commit a crime. We love that concept, and I think we all know somebody that maybe, hey, they shouldn't be driving, or maybe they shouldn't do this or shouldn't do that. And the same goes for firearms. We're no apologists for someone that shouldn't have a gun or shouldn't be, driving a vehicle because they're drunk, anything like that. But if you can craft an ERPO, a red flag law, that protects someone's due process rights, because right now we think it tramples them, they just pay lip service to due process, because a judge can issue that order on the say-so of a of a petitioner. Just one party is there before the judge. They only have to meet a very low evidentiary standard, which is preponderance of the evidence. In fact, if you look at that evidence, there is likely to be a threat as they are likely to not be a threat. It's, 49, 51% type of threshold. So in addition, when we talk about red flag laws, we're talking about a person who's dangerous. That's what is purported. The petitioner says this person's very, very dangerous. All law enforcement is doing is taking the guns away, still leaving that dangerous person. Why don't we get them some help as well? Because they can be dangerous with a gun, a car, a 5-gallon can of gasoline, and some matches.
Certainly that is true. However, in the current atmosphere with AR-15s legal and the kinds of ammunition you can get, the kinds of firearms you can get in the hands of the wrong person, we saw in Dayton, within 30 seconds, 9 people were dead.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of event begs a solution to the problem of how do you keep weapons, whatever they may be, whether it's a firearm or a knife or an automobile or a can of gas, how do you keep weapons out of the hands of those people who should not have access to it? What is the gun lobby's solution?
Well, we're not apologists for those people. And we represent the good law-abiding citizens. Those people are on an extreme fringe that are not included by us whatsoever. And so I think that's a societal or a cultural problem right there. Criminals are always going to do a criminal act. That's what actually makes them criminals, and you can make the laws. I mean, hey, guarantee you, if they ban semi-automatic firearms, they ban magazines over 10 rounds, I'm not going to have them. I will turn mine in if I have to, because I'm a law-abiding person. But don't let people be so naive as to think that criminals will turn in theirs and subject themselves to that. It just isn't going to work like that.
Thank goodness Utah has not been the scene of a mass shooting like we have seen in other places, except for Trolley Square. That was a case where highly regrettable. But these higher profile mass shootings that are taking place now, Gilroy, California, and El Paso, and Dayton, and Parkland, Florida, do you see Utah ever having that same kind of incident happen here?
Honestly, I think we've been lucky. It really doesn't know any boundaries. And I think, Utah has, what, 3.5 million people. Maybe the odds of it happening, maybe are just less. But I do think we've been lucky. up till now. But I think the difference would be that we have far fewer gun-free zones. We have, 800,000 odd concealed carry permits for a population, an able population, 2.5 million of those eligible for that. At 800,000 permits, that's a huge percentage of people, even given that many of those permits are held by non-residents. So I don't think you can stop an individual bent on violence or evil. But what you can do, and it has been shown, that you can reduce the number of those injured or killed once they start.
Many of the mass shootings in this country have involved individuals who have legally obtained an AR-15. And is there a legitimate reason for someone to own an AR-15?
Do you consider recreation legitimate?
Sure.
Okay, there you go. 20 million, maybe more, people legitimately recreate with or use for hunting or self-defense AR-15 style firearms, semi-automatic firearms across this nation. Millions, if not billions of rounds are fired every week perfectly legally. And we have less than 3% of any type of semi-automatic rifle, in fact, any type of rifle whatsoever, I made a mistake there, any type of rifle whatsoever is used in a crime. So we see by experience that there is not a pattern of these being used. Yes, they are used in the high-profile things. I mean, look at Chicago. We lost 30 people in a weekend in these high-profile shootings. We lost double that in Chicago in that week. Why aren't we talking about those poor folks? Because,
Chicago being handguns, you're saying?
Exactly.
Right. However, handguns won't kill 9 people in 30 seconds.
Well, actually, we did see that in Virginia Tech. We saw more than that. So I don't know about 30 seconds, but during that whole incident, he used handguns.
Well, the reason I bring that 30 seconds up is because in Dayton, Ohio, the police response was almost immediate. And the fact is that the man had already shot 9 people fatally before police were able to kill him because of the high-capacity AR-15 that he was using.
Okay.
My question is, if these people are going to be able to get a hold of these guns, legally or not, is there any reason to have them legally available? And he got the Dayton man had his weapon legally. Is there any reason to think that that ought to be a legitimate ownership?
Well, yes, because of the vast, overwhelming majority of people will never commit a crime with a semi-automatic rifle, let alone an AR-15 or an AK-47. So, I mean, when we talk about that, the next step, if we were to say, no, there's no legitimate reason, logistically, how are you going to unring that bell? Yeah. How are you going to, put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak? They tried to do it in California. They've registered them. They've banned magazines over 10 rounds. You now essentially have to register when you buy ammunition there. They've been on the forefront of all this, ideal gun control, but it hasn't solved the problems they're looking at.
There are many in our society who would blame the gun lobby and the NRA and the Second Amendment advocates for the atmosphere that we have now, where guns are so prevalent in this country. How would you answer that criticism, and what would you say to the families and loved ones of those who were killed in an atmosphere that we currently have? Well,
Bob, representing the Utah Shooting Sports Council, I don't represent the NRA or anyone else, represent the Utah Shooting Sports Council. We absolutely feel for them. They, the folks that would seek to take away our firearms, or the people that grieve right now for those folks lost in these killings, they do not have a monopoly on grief. We grieve the same way they do at the loss of life, at the hideous evil that is being, perpetrated upon our citizens. But let's look at, when we start to look at solutions and we start to apply solutions across the entire United States, we need to realize that crime is not spread evenly across these United States like you would think, that everybody gets an even piece of it. In fact, 50% of homicides with firearms are committed in 2% of the counties in the United States. 3/4 of all homicides in the United States are done in 5% of the counties. What is it about that? Why is it that Utah has an extremely permissive ability to have firearms, carry firearms at a young age, no restriction on magazines or types of firearms, you can even have machine guns here, yet we have the 4th or 5th lowest crime rate and violent crime rate with firearms in the nation? If it held true that guns were the problem, the ease of availability of firearms, the ease of access to firearms were the problem, we should be 5th highest in the nation, or if not 1st highest.
What is the solution? Every time we have a mass shooting, politicians will come out and say we need to have a serious discussion about firearms and safety and restrictions and mental health and all of those things. From where you sit, what is the answer to eliminating the carnage that comes when the wrong people get their hands on deadly weapons?
You know, Bob, I wish I did have the solution. I know that for myself, I carry a firearm day in and day out. I have committed to myself and my family that I will be back home every day. I am not I'm not hoping for the chance I get to use that firearm, but I will do so if I have to. First, I'll try to run, hide, escape, evade. But if I have to get back home, to continue my way of life, I will do so. But what we've done in so many of these areas, especially the areas we see these shooters engage in, is that these people, good law-abiding people, have been effectively disarmed, not allowed to carry a firearm, or been required to leave it in their vehicle while they go into an establishment. But what we see in areas that do allow someone to carry a firearm for lawful self-defense, those deaths go down. In fact, the shooter in Colorado, he shopped around until he found a movie theater that had a sign that said no guns allowed, because I think he realized the death toll would be much higher when he engaged than in another.
Is America safer with more guns on the street or fewer guns on the street?
Well, depends on who has the guns, I guess. If law enforcement and law-abiding citizens have those firearms, indeed, I think those people are, in fact, safer. Just like you're safer in the event of a fire if you have a fire extinguisher. You're safer driving a car if you have a seatbelt on. But when bad guys have guns, they will commit crimes, and oftentimes innocent civilians are in the way.
Whenever we have a mass shooting in this country, there are those who will immediately point their fingers at mental illness and people having guns that should not have guns. Is it reasonable to expect the government to be able to intercept those folks who shouldn't have firearms and somehow either counsel or medicate the danger away?
Well, we have right now under federal law, and every state must apply whether they even have a state law or not, that a person that's been adjudicated mentally ill is not allowed to have a firearm. They can't even have constructive possession. They can't hold one. They can't have ammunition. And they can't buy one in a private sale. They cannot buy one in through a federal firearms licensed gun dealer. But let's remember this, that 96% of those people that are mentally ill are never going to harm themselves or anybody. In fact, they're more likely to be victims of a crime than perpetrate a crime. It's that 4% that are violently mentally ill. And the government is doing what it can do, I think right now, to identify those folks, and then they are then on that no-buy list. You can't have one, you can't buy one.
Whenever we have mass shootings, so many people look to politicians to solve the problem. In finding a solution to eliminating the carnage that comes when the wrong people get guns, should we be looking at politicians, or is there someplace else that we ought to appeal to get this problem to diminish?
Bob, legislators have a role in society. Sometimes we hate them, sometimes we don't. But they have a role, and they can help us facilitate some of the changes that we can't make on our own. But we know by experience that these mass shooters have exhibited some type of behavior ahead of time. They have let that be known to their family, to their friends, their neighbors, their coworkers. And that is where perhaps some of these protection orders could come into play, as long as they apply appropriate due process in that, which I haven't seen yet in any of the proposals. But we have been working on a very interesting collaborative effort with the Harvard Chan School of Medicine, IHC, Marissa Sobelson-Hen, and Kathy Barber there, along with the Minority Leader Brian King, Representative Steve Elison, and others at the legislature to help facilitate something that we can do among friends and family and neighbors and coworkers.
Not involving the courts.
Not involving the courts. And if we see something, now, it could come to an extreme situation where, yeah, that's maybe necessary, but done with due process, done with the appropriate evidentiary standards and so on and so forth. But what we're hoping to do is educate folks, let them realize what the warning signs are among their family and friends, or even among themselves. And they can reach out and they can say, another individual could say, hey, I know you're not doing so well. You just had a death in the family or a loss in your job. I'm going to babysit your guns for a week. Now, we don't have to contact law enforcement. We don't have to, keep them forever. There's no list kept of that. It's between family and friends. It's outside of the legal, outside of the legislative standards like that. Now, in some states like California and Washington, you can't do that. I cannot physically take your firearm from you, even if you wanted me to have it. You can't do it even in an exigent situation because that's a violation of a transfer. So, and I hope we don't get to that point in Utah, because many people are already utilizing that solution right here in Utah and other states by just safekeeping, babysitting, if you will, another person's firearm.
School is going to be back in session here in the next few weeks. Parents are preparing their children to go back to the classroom. Can you give them, in the current atmosphere and with current laws, can you give them any assurance that their children will be safe at school?
I can't give any assurances like that, but we have a much better ability in Utah because school employees, whether they be teachers, custodians, administration, lunch workers, librarians, and even parents, can carry a firearm for lawful self-defense. I think, though, let's look at it another way. I have gone into many schools, elementary, middle schools, high schools, and never been asked for my ID. I walk around the halls, I don't have a tag on, I don't have anything on. I'm just a stranger to everyone there. I have a legitimate purpose there, but people don't know that. I think that we need to start instituting things like you're trespassing if you haven't checked in at the office. If you don't have an ID tag on that has been verified, if you haven't, I went to the Department of Mental Health or Department of Health and Human Services for Utah. I couldn't even walk into one of their meeting rooms last week until I had showed my ID, it was verified, I had a sticker on the entire time. And I had to wear that sticker that showed my name that had been verified. It's not just, something I wrote on myself. We need to start some simple type things that said, hey, anybody coming into that school had better have a reason and had better checked in. That's just some low-hanging fruit that we can grasp. In addition, doors need to be locked on the outside. And I'm sorry, but we are at that situation right now. If the only reason to do these measures is if we care about protecting our kids. If we don't, then we can continue the way we've been doing.
What happens now? 31 people are dead after this most recent incident, Dayton and El Paso. What do we do now?
We talk. We collaborate. We get some of the best clinicians, the best people with insight into this, and I'm hoping that mental health will be a focus of it and start to identify that.
But we've done all of that for years, decades now, since the first mass shootings started to happen. Are we just going to continue to talk, or are we going to actually do something?
Well, when you say do something, as a gun lobbyist, I hear, take the guns away. That's what we hear. That's what we're conditioned to hear, okay? We don't have to wonder what would happen. All we have to do is actually look at some of the laboratories in Europe, some of the laboratories across this world that have banned guns, that banned, magazines, let alone, the entire gun and ammunition and so on and so forth, and yet criminals still behave like criminals. Criminals still exhibit these mass shooting tendencies, And to the point where the United States is, like I said before, 66th on the list. Now, you're asking for a solution. Perhaps it's in video games. Perhaps it's in medication, the psychotropic medication. Perhaps it's in, what's different is, as we look at that trend of the shootings going up, we see that same trend in single-parent families. They don't have a mom or they don't have a dad in there. And there are some common denominators there. Maybe that's where we need to start looking if what we've looked at right now hasn't worked.
Clark Aposhian, chairman of the Utah Shooting Sports Council. Thank you so much for being part of 3 Questions.
No problem. Anytime, Bob.